Hi, my name is Madeline Maffett, and today I am going to be talking about my science fair project, which is the effect of the number of hours of sleep on visuospatial and short-term memory, specifically in students aged 15 to 16. Just some background information about the brain. The brain needs sleep to function, to remember things, just really to function. Um, and specifically, I wanted to focus on sleep. So the recommended number of hours of sleep is 7 to 9 for adolescents, just because their brains are still growing and they're still developing, and there's a lot of things that happen while the brain is sleeping or while the body is sleeping. The brain is still working and growing and creating new synapses and connections. And it's really important that students get or that adolescents get enough sleep, 7 to 9 hours specifically, to make sure that they are giving their brain that time to grow. So just some setup for my project. I had 50 participants, once again ages 15 to 16, and each participant received a questionnaire, 3 visuospatial testers, a list of words, and questions about these words. Now, these tests were meant to test visuospatial skills and short-term memory. Each student took a pre-test for the visuospatial testers, and then for 30 seconds, and then the next 2 visuospatial tests were a minute each because they got consistently harder, just testing to see if they could learn as they went. Then each student had 30 seconds to look at a list of words of different sizes, different colors, um, different categories of words, and then they had 30 seconds to fill out a questionnaire about these words. This is the visuospatial testers. So on the left is the pre-test. Now the pre-test, they were given 30 seconds to do. So how you fill this out is you look at the filled in cube, and the blank ones, you fill in the number that corresponds to that cube. So with the answer key on top, you fill in the number of what the pattern is. So the one in the middle was test A, or test number 1, and then the one on the right is test number 2. So number 1 and number 2, the students had a minute to fill out. And then this is the list of words that the students were given. So as you can see, the words are all different sizes, different colors, and once again, very different categories of words. They were asked questions like, were all of the words the same color? Were all of the words the same size? How many words were emotions? How many words were colors? Things like that, just to see what they could remember from the 30 seconds of looking at this list of words. So my hypothesis for this project was if a student receives less than 7 hours of sleep, then they will fill in 6 less boxes and answer 4 more questions incorrectly than a student who received more than 7 hours of sleep, which is the recommended amount of sleep. My variables for this project was my independent variable was the number of hours of sleep that each student received. My dependent was the number of correct answers of both the short-term assessment and visuospatial tests. And the controlled variable was that each student had the same amount of time to fill out each test. Each student received the same test and instructions on how to complete the tests, just making sure that everyone had the same experience with the tests across the board. So this is the data from the memory test, the short-term memory test. So each student, they answered 6 questions, and the group that answered the most amount of questions correctly was people who received 5 hours of sleep and people who received 7 hours of sleep. So they received on average, they answered a little more than 2.5 questions correctly. This is the average number of answers on test number 1, correct answers on test number 1 versus the number of hours of sleep. And actually, people who received 3 hours of sleep answered the most amount of correctly, they correctly filled in the most amount of boxes. compared to the rest of the groups. And this is test number 2, and people who received 10 hours of sleep filled in the most correct boxes on this test. So with all the data, there really does not seem to be much of a correlation, but there is kind of an explanation for this. The brain is a muscle, and as a muscle, it is going to be able to adjust when there is a lack of sleep. Actually, on the questionnaire that each student received, every single person said that they do not think that they get enough sleep on average during their school week, meaning that they consistently deprive their brain of sleep. So the brain is going to be able to make adjustments in other areas to make sure that they are supporting the important functions like memory, because that is something that students use every day, which means it's going to be very important in their lives and a very central focus of the brain. So the brain is probably going to centralize its energy into memory and visuospatial skills and short-term memory rather than other things that it really deems to not be as important at the time. So if I were to do this project in the future, I would want to try to control the number of hours to have even groupings of students, because this project, because this project was with people, it's very hard to control what people do and how many hours they sleep. So if I were to do this in the future, I would want to make sure that the groups of students that I have had an equal number of the different hours to make sure that I was actually getting an accurate reading, because while I had relatively even groups, I did have a few outliers, and so that definitely kind of changed my data in some places. So I would want to make sure that I had a pretty even number of people with the different hours. I would also want to study the quality of sleep more than quantity, just to see if that also could affect memory, because people do have like different issues with their sleep, that even if they are getting enough sleep, it's not good sleep, so that could also affect their health and their memory. So how I think my project can benefit society, sleep deprivation is a very common issue, because most people do have sleep deprivation at some point in their lives. And as people get older, sleep issues do become a lot more common as their sleep patterns and their rhythms are thrown off with work and stress and other life issues. But if people understood how much sleep and sleep deprivation really does affect them, they might be more willing to change their habits to live healthier and more rested lives, which would in turn affect their bodily health and the longevity of their life. So why I did this project, this is actually a continuation project. Last year I studied different sleep patterns in mice, but with COVID-19 issues, I was not able to continue with that project. So I chose to continue with a different type of memory. But memory has always really interested me, because my family has a history of Alzheimer's and dementia on both sides of my family. So it's a really personal issue to me, and it really fascinates me, specifically memory and the issues that memory can have. So looking at the different aspects of it really challenged me and what I could learn about it, but it also really fulfilled my curiosity and hunger for learning about it and what I can do to help. So thank you so much for listening to me speak about my project, and I really hope you enjoyed learning about my work and how I think it can help. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.